Welcome along, everybody, to this session, the first session that I'd like to call out once again. The great thanks to the sponsors of the event. Please do make sure you take a moment to support them and the investment they've made in supporting this great event. Also, I would like you to take a moment to thank the organisers of the event. We're towards the end of all these sessions in May. I think it's been pretty massive in what has been achieved in the time period. So again, take a moment to thank them. They don't generally are doing it off their own bat, and they are all volunteers, and I'm sure they'd love to get some feedback just to as a word of thanks, at the very least, to let them know your appreciation for the amount of work that they have put in for the time. And finally, thank you for attending. I know it's a Monday morning. It is towards the end of May. This session will be available on record afterwards, but I do appreciate people being there, being live. What we'll do is we'll have you ask any questions in the session. We'll answer what we can, and then we'll look at answering the majority of those after the session so we can get through the content. So again, appreciate you being here, and let's kick on with things. So hopefully you're in the right session. This session is all about search. My name is Robert Crane. I'm a business analyst with a technology background that is focused on helping businesses get the most from the Microsoft Cloud investment and doing that securely. If you want some more information about me, you can find that in the lower right-hand corner there. You'll also find my Twitter handle there, so please feel free to reach out on the socials and say hello. So our session today is going to be talking about what I think is probably the most underrated piece of functionality in the Microsoft Cloud in general, and especially in Microsoft 365. That is all around search. Now, we as humans have known how to basically do search for many years. We've been able to aggregate our information into massive libraries, and we've been able to catalog them. We've also been able to retrieve those. Now, as the human experience has grown, so has our knowledge, so has the accumulation of knowledge. Now, for those of you who probably are as ancient as me might remember the days when you actually went to a library and went to take out physical books, borrow physical books, and you went to a index card and you basically went through the index cards under alphabetical order, found the one that you wanted, gave you a special number, you went, took that number to the shelves and hopefully found the book that you were after. So that sort of technology, that approach we've known for many, many years, but thanks to technology, we've been able to accelerate and improve that and open that up to a wider range of people. Now, for those of you who may also remember back in the day that there have been many search engines. Now, one of the first out of the gate was Yahoo. Now, if we technically look at the way that Yahoo worked, it really wasn't searching, it was really categorizing information. So basically what would happen is you would discover a site, a new site will pop up, and maybe it was something about computer security, for example. And then what would happen is someone would take that link or that information and they would slot it away effectively in a digital index card stored on the Yahoo site. Now, the way we found information in inverted commas was we basically went through a category and a subcategory and so on. So it was very similar to the approach that people had always taken with their library cards. But again, it was a little bit more automated, but we know that that sort of system didn't last long. So we typically went from that to Alta Vista to the search technologies that we have today that are far more advanced. Now, if we look at how businesses are thinking about search today, if you have a look at this YouTube video for Westpac, you will notice that throughout the whole video, there is not one www, there is not one web address, there is not one email address. The way that businesses are looking to get customers or looking to engage with their customers is via search. So the concept here is that you don't go to www.westpac.com/investor property. You basically just do a search for Westpac investor property on your favorite search engine, and the Westpac site will pop in at the top. So we've moved from this world where people were used to sorting filing cabinets, index cards, a very standardized system, to a very ad hoc system where basically now we just throw the information wherever it lands up, anywhere on the internet or anywhere in a file server. And the expectation is that we can use search technology to basically be able to find that information, to pull out what we want. That is the expectation that we see today. But the reality of the situation is when you actually go and start analysing what's happening and the time it takes, we find that our workers are spending 20 or more % of their time looking for information. So, for example, if you've ever been looking for a file in a file server, an old world file server, I can sure you can attest to the fact of going down a structure and then coming back up and then going down another branch and then up another branch and then down another branch and up another branch, looking for that one file. Then typically you'll go and ask the person that created the file, where is that file? They can't find it. So in the end, what happens is they eventually find it, they attach it as an email to an email and they send it to you. Now, the problem with that is obviously how many copies of that one file have we now created? And what is the most current value? What is the one that we're working on? Is it the one that was sent to us or the one that we've changed? And when we change it, what do? Send it back to the original person and they then put it somewhere and it disappears forever again. So search is really good. Search is really beneficial, but up to a point, what we find is there is too much information and we need to spend more time thinking about the way that we organize our data. Now, as mentioned, this time comes at a cost. So the time wasted looking for information results in lost productivity. So again, we're looking at, depending on the figures, there are lots of figures out there, but it is costing you real time and effort. I'm sure, again, everybody's been through the experience where you've been looking for something and you've wasted hours and hours and hours, maybe not, but a long time looking for stuff. And then in the end, you get fed up, you can't find it, and you recreate what you need. And then probably an hour or two later, you find where that file was. So again, we are beginning to have a situation where search is good, it will find the information, but we really need to invest some more thought into how we structure this and how we make use of it rather than staying in the old world. Now, when we look at the cloud, we look at the ability to store information, we have moved from a situation where we had limited hard disks, where we had a limited fixed capacity on-prem to effectively most systems today in the cloud you can consider to be unlimited. It can really digest and swallow just about any amount of information you can throw on it. So look at, again, the internet in general, how much information is actually out there that is available to you at the press of a key. Now, the problem is that people still seem to address the cloud services like Microsoft 365 as a place to store data. So one of the challenges with traditional SharePoint has been that most people would say SharePoint is the place that documents go to die. So we put the documents somewhere in SharePoint, it disappears, and we don't know where it is. It's not in a structure, it's not in a C drive, it's not in an F drive. How do we actually find it? So one of the first concepts is to think about that we want to create an environment where we are collaborating around data rather than just storing it. So that would mean is in a Microsoft 365 space, we have multiple locations in which we can put information. Now we get good collaboration with Teams, we get good collaboration with Yammer, we still have emails, we still have SharePoint sites, we have our own OneDrive. Again, we're given this flexibility to collaborate. So the first change in thinking is we need to think about, okay, this information that I'm working with is going to need to be accessed by someone else. So how do I put it in a way that it can be collaborated on rather than just stored away somewhere? Now, again, when we look at some stats here, we basically find that many companies have these collaboration systems. How many people out there do you know that have been using Office 365, Microsoft 365, BPOS back in the day, and really they're still using it as a large file server in the cloud? They're just putting their emails, their attachments. Their collaboration concept is still emailing attachments backwards and forwards to each other. They may have one SharePoint site with one document library with a copy of their file server in it. So again, the tools have changed, the opportunities have changed, but many of the practices remain the same. So you'll see there that 65% of leaders agree that moving from a hierarchical to a team-based working is critical for success. So what they're saying is the old structure, the old way of putting things in subdirectories, going deep, is not being productive to our users. Our users aren't able to find the information that they want readily to actually get their job done. We need to rethink that. But the problem is that these things haven't yet been implemented, right? How do we actually go in and start implementing and taking advantage of these sort of features? Now, if we look at enterprise search today, it is time consuming to go and set some of this stuff up. And it's also very frustrating from users. So these are typical responses that you see from users. They have to navigate from page to page. They have to go to all these different locations. They put in something and something else pops up. It isn't what they expected. So it is very challenging because the users are indoctrinated with the way that they find information outside the organization. And their expectation is that they can basically go and achieve the same result, that the tools in front of them will give them very similar results. Now, at the back end, the enterprise search is tough, right? So the reason is it's missing some of this page ranking concept, this ability, for example, to also have the metadata, to have other pages pointing to it. So one of the way many modern search engines work out what is most relevant is by looking at how many other sites are pointing to that same information. So it's not just the value of the information, it's the metadata describing that, and the interactivity of that document really does make a difference. Now, in an enterprise, we may not be getting that. We may not be getting the volume of signals. We may not be getting enough information in there traditionally to be able to give users good results, because the one document they're looking for, maybe it hasn't been touched for a number of years. How does that actually then get surfaced? Now, if we take a step back and we have a look at some of the many services that are available to users today. So, for example, we have Teams. Teams is a service that supports chat, right? Conversations. It supports files, calendars, tasks, and lists. Look at our OneDrive. That also has files, but those files are different from the files in our Teams. Then we look at Outlook. So Outlook has messages, probably something like chat. We also have files. Again, we have calendars, we have tasks. So now we've got tasks in 2 places, files in 3 locations, messages in basically 2 locations, but they have different relevance for different users and for different purposes. Now extend that through SharePoint, Yammer, Stream, Sway. This volume of information is growing, and it's not typically growing deeper, it's growing wider. More and more services with more and more data is being added. And again, how does a user find, for example, a newsletter that was created in Sway that they thought maybe was created in Word and lived in a SharePoint site? If they're looking in SharePoint, they're not going to be able to find it because it's over here in something else called Sway. Now extend that, many companies today are still working with on-prem environments. What about your on-prem file servers? What about the environments that may be in hosted data centers as well? And of course, we've got our social media out there. Most people, again, still want this interaction, excuse me, they want their interaction with social media. What are people saying about my business? Are people trying to communicate with me with social media? So I don't know if you ever had the experience of trying to work with a company via social media or make contact with them. Some companies do it really, really well, but some companies claim that they do, but in the end of the day, you've got to ring them or send them an email. So where's that consistency? But once they start using social media, how is that captured? How is that tracked? How can I refer back to that? And then, of course, we've got third-party cloud services. We've got Salesforce. We've got Xero. We've got all these sort of things out there that also contain information that people want to know. How do I get access to this? How can I search for this? Because maybe my invoices are stored in a third-party service, not in SharePoint. So again, the size of the data pool is not just common data like a file server. It is in many locations, many services, which potentially may remain hidden to many users. So the question here then is, okay, we have a lot of value in the new services, in its ability to digest information. We have a huge amount of abilities here for the information to be available wherever we are at any time on any device. So it's solving that ability to do that. But the real value is that we need to get that in the hands of users who can make decisions and get access to that information when and where they need it. Now, a user's expectation is going to be something like this. It's like I go to my favorite internet search engine, I see a one-line topic and I type in there what I'm looking for, and hopefully what comes out is the actual data that I'm after. So at the end of the day, the most important thing is going to be simplicity, and it's also going to be a direct route to the relevant data. Now, the good thing is that the Microsoft environment has that capability built into it. It's always had that capability built into it. However, one of the challenges has been that Microsoft has put many different ways to find that information, as you can see here. Sometimes there's SharePoint search, sometimes there's Outlook search, sometimes there's a find thing in the desktop app. So the technology has always been there, but the real challenge has been is Microsoft unfortunately has given us different signals. Now, why is that? Well, that's because many of these things that you see here have come from the different teams. So the search for Exchange was done by the Exchange team. The searching for files and folders was done by the SharePoint team. The searching for anything else was done by that individual team. So you ended up with all these disparate ways of actually getting to your information. And that made it confusing for users because their expectation is I go to a single site, I do a single line of search, and what I want pops out. Now, the good news is the technology that sits underneath this has been there for a long time. It's known as the Microsoft Graph. So the Microsoft Graph is providing us all that metadata, all that additional information about who's searching, what's relevant, what ties to each other. Does this tie to a person? Does this tie to this project? All of that has been in there, but it hasn't as yet really been surfaced for us. It has been there, it has been utilized, but there hasn't been that single point to really tap in to the graph. Well, the good news is that Microsoft took a step back and it is redesigning its approach to finding information, and it is calling that the Microsoft search. So what that means is that when you do a search now, the search is now a single team or a single service that looks across things like SharePoint, Windows, Outlook, Stream, Yammer, Teams, Notes. It's one search to rule them all, which it really should have been since day one, but again, it's taken a while to get to this point. Now, if you have a look at your environment today, you will probably see that up the top of your Outlook on the web is a single search banner. Up the top of SharePoint, up the top of Word, Excel, PowerPoint is this single search bar. Now, if you haven't seen this, this will be rolling out to you shortly. But the idea here is that one single search bar up the top there is the one that rules them all. We will see that in every single application, whether it's on the web, on the desktop, or on your mobile. It will give you that consistent searchability because it will tap into the Microsoft Graph, which is sitting behind, providing us those signals and giving us that ability across our information in Microsoft 365. The example here is that if I do a search, for example, drone in my SharePoint site, you'll see that what it returns for me is any site that matches that, as you'll see at the top there. Then it will match any files that also contain that word and also any news articles. So now we're getting that consistent approach of, okay, well, hang on, what I might be searching for is not just files, it's not just messages, it's not just chat. It may actually be a location, it may be some other piece of data. So we need to look at search as a thing that is not generally restricted just to file data. And that is something that we're now seeing across the Microsoft environment in a standard location, typically across the banner of applications and web services. Now, many people would say that, okay, I understand that search is built into it, search is native, search is improving, but where do I start? Where's this single entry point that I can go to find all the information I want in my Microsoft 365 environment? Where is the one place that I can start that I know that I can use as a location to really go and start leveraging the information that is inside the tenant? Now, my response to that is Delft. If you haven't had a look at what Delft is and what Delft can do, it is a service that is provided in every single tenant. So every single service that has a Microsoft subscription will have basically Delft there. And what does Delft do? Well, Delft is what I tell people, the global Office 365 search engine. It also allows you to see what others are doing. So remember, we talked about the graph not just being about files and folders, it's also about your interactions with other people. So you'll find that most people work in a small group, they interact with a handful of people. Those people are going to provide the most relevant information, the most relevant signals to you about what you need to get your job done. So the graph knows about that. All right. And the idea here is that most users don't open a huge amount of files, right? They work on a dozen or so files at a time, and they may be strewn over many locations, deep down in structures, but typically they're not working on 100, 200 files at a time. So what we can do is we can surface these common files in a single web interface in Delft. And as I mentioned, we can see what other people are doing inside our organization, and we can create favorites and boards. So this is basically like Pinterest or whatever. If there's a document you access all the time, you can favorite like an internet favorite, so you can get a better idea of not having to waste time and go chasing that document and always know where it is located. Now, the number one benefit of Delft, without question, is the fact there is nothing you need to configure. It is all configured for you. Everything is good to go from the moment you start using the tenant, and it will improve over time as it learns more about the interactions that you have and others have within your tenant. So rather than carrying on about it, why don't I show you? So if you go to your Office 365, Microsoft 365 tenant, you should find an icon here for Delft. So if we click on Delft, the first thing that you'll notice is that we are presented with information about our identity, email. We also get a snapshot of our calendar. So again, think of it a bit like a page about me. But if I go into the top left-hand corner here, you'll see that what I can now do when I click in that corner is I can do a search for information. So now I'm doing a search for BRK 2122, and it's now searching every single location that I have access to. Now, the good thing about Delft is that in the background, all that information is being catalogued, is being indexed, but because of the securities, I cannot get access to information that I'm not supposed to. So I can't magically do a search for the boss's payroll Excel spreadsheet and have that to come out. It's all controlled by securities. And on the other side, that's why the securities are very important to get correct in the environment. Now, if I go in and click on this will open the file for me. I'll be able to edit it, print it, do whatever I need to do. Now, the great thing about this is I haven't had to navigate through a structure. I've just basically done a search. I found the file that I wanted, click on it, I can edit it. I don't need to know where it is, where it's located. I've got access to it. You'll also notice that it has searched not only the name of the file, but has also searched for that same match inside other files. Now, what I can also do is I can go in here and I can filter this down as well if I want. So we've got our traditional search in here, but if we have a look, what I also get in Delft is the ability to look at a feed of documents. So these feed of documents are the documents that I've been working on most recently that are most relevant to me. So this being the one that I worked on the most, and it becomes the case less and less important as I scroll down through the list. So it's a priority list of the files that I access. Now, if I go in here, I can go in and say, you know what? I knew it was an Excel file. So now I can filter the feed of the documents that I've been working on regularly, which chances are is that's what I'm going to be looking for, not something from 5 or 6 years ago. I really want to find the stuff I'm working on lately, and I can pull up that file. Now, again, if I click on that file, I will be taken directly to that location. I don't need to know that this is actually in my OneDrive or actually in a site called Demo, but it is noted there. Now, I can also, if I click the ellipse, you'll see that I can send a link. So I can send a link to somebody else, which overcomes the need to download it, attach it, resend it, end up with multiple copies. I can also copy a link, and I can also see who has permissions for this. And I can also talk about this on Yammer. So we can share that rather than putting in an email. We can collaborate using the tools. Now, at the top here, you'll notice that not only do I have the ability to search documents, but I also can search attachments. So I can go in here and I can basically say, well, how many times have we gone in there and looked for that one attachment that someone sent to you? Well, it's so much easier to do here in Delft because it will, again, give us that priority based on our relevance or the relevance of that information to us. So that's the second way we can use Delft. The first way is to just do a raw random search like we do on the internet in the top left-hand corner. The second way is to look at our document feeds. And the third way that we can do it is we can look at our interactions with others. So this is Lewis Collins, colleague, and I can look at Lewis's documents based on a priority to me. So Delft knows that I work with Lewis, that we share documents together, And these are the documents that both he and I have access to, but this is being curated for me. These are his documents that he was working on that may be relevant to me. Okay, now if we go through some of these, you'll see that there are a range of documents there, and you'll notice one of these here is the budget file. So if I'm looking for something, maybe Lewis is working on a budget, I can easily go to that person and find that information. Now you'll notice that that is actually in Lewis's OneDrive for Business. And the reason I can see it is because he has chosen to share it with me. So again, it obeys all of those normal privileges. Now, as mentioned, the great thing about Delft is it gives you the way to search via the traditional method by putting in a list of what you're after or typing in a search. You can then find a feed of your documents here, and you can also look at your interactions with others. Now, what we can do down here is we can also, as I mentioned, favorite information. So we can say, you know what, these documents here, I work on a regular basis. I don't want to have to go hunting through a feed or looking at interactions. So what I can do is, again, like an internet favorite, I can just nominate that as a favorite. Now, those favorites are unique to me, but maybe what I want to do is I want to create a group favorite. So this is known as a board. So in Delft, different people can pin documents to the board. So imagine a project where someone's working on the budget, someone's working on the timeline, somebody's working on the Q&A or whatever. We can now pin all of those to one location, and it doesn't matter where they're actually located in the structure. When we want to share it with another colleague, they can come straight to this board and interact with it, and the information is again secured based on the underlying security. And all I need to do if I need to get somebody else involved with this is just to send them a link, as you see there. So once again, if you haven't explored Delft, I'd certainly recommend that you take a moment, go in, have a look at it, see what it shows about you and your organization. And the way that we find that, again, is we should see it on the front page there. If not, go into the 9 dots up the top there and then go into all apps, and that should then display it for you. Now, one of the important things that a lot of people overlook that will improve your search is metadata. So think of metadata as tagging. So when you put something in a folder in a drive, so if you put something in a folder in a C drive, the metadata is actually the folder name, right? And the good thing about using metadata here in Microsoft 365 is we can have multiple metadata items per multiple metadata per item. When we put things in folders in storage, we can only put them in one folder or a number of subfolders and they get lost. Well, we can tag those using metadata. And we can have a hierarchy. We can use managed metadata. So we could have, for example, country, state, city, suburb, street as a way to have a hierarchical arrangement if we want to do that. Now, putting things in metadata allows me to filter and sort information much quicker. So I present my information initially ad hoc, but then I filter and sort it down to finding the way I want. And the old way of doing metadata was largely around folders. So you can largely take your folder structure and convert it to metadata and flatten it out. So you'll see here, here's an example of a document library in SharePoint. I have an additional column here called customer, which has a tag. So before I would have had to put these items in individual folders to categorize them. Now I just use a custom field with a custom meta tag. What's the benefit of that? Well, now, thanks to the functions of SharePoint, I can go in here and I can group them by customer. So now the display will look at what the metadata is and will break them out as you see on the right. So what that means is that now looks very much like a folder structure without having to have folders. It means I can find that information much quicker and filter and sort it to suit my needs. Now, going beyond that, if you go into SharePoint in the top right hand there, you'll see that there's a filter button. If you click the filter button, it will throw out an additional tab here, and you can then go in and I can sort not only by the customer or group by the customer, I can also do, for example, by the file type and also the date. So I can say, you know what, I want to see PDFs from customer B. So I've gone from a list of thousands down to exactly what I need. So I don't need to have a deep structure. A lot of this filtering, sorting is enhanced by using metadata. So remember that searching isn't necessarily just about typing a random sequence of what you're looking for. It can also be a matter of, well, I know it's not this, I know it's not that, and there's the information that I need. And then I can still use search on top of that. But by filtering out the stuff you don't want makes a huge difference to search, because if you do a search for bike shop, you will get results for bikes, results for shop, and results for bike shop. Really, what you wanted was bike shop together. Okay, so filtering and tagging is going to help you refine down to what you want before you utilize the search that you want. Now, remember that as we see here in things like Teams, we get the ability to have search in the top item here. So search, again, is included in our environment, and it will pop out the information that we want. All right, so again, a quick run through on that. So if you go into SharePoint, so you'll see the search up the top here, you'll see the search again up the top here. Then if I go into, for example, let me go into this one. Okay, we'll go into a presentations option there. So again, I can now do a old style search. So in the top right-hand corner here, I could do a 2122. So this is the old style search that we're still seeing. Right, so this is what Microsoft is bringing together in that one location for us there. Okay, now if we go into a site that has metadata, all right, so what we need to do is, hopefully, there it is, find the site in here, and you can take any document library. So let's take our document library here. As I showed you, you can see that here's the metadata column that I've added. I've gone in and I can now add a filter option here and say, I want to see Word documents from customer Z, and there are none. Typically when I do a search like that, let's try customer C as well. So there's the one that I want. So we can use these tools to, again, flatten our structure and allow us to find that information. Now, if we go and look in Teams here, you'll see once again, we get the search up the top here. Now, one of the things you may not be aware of is I can type, for example, and do a search for something here. Now, when the returns come, I'm going to see messages. So this is going to show me any time that is mentioned. I'm going to see any people that's found, and I'm also going to find any files where that is mentioned as well. Okay, so this is searching all that information. Now, what you may not be aware of is you can also use the slash key. So if we look at the slash key, you'll see that you've got a huge range of options here. So we go in here and do slash files. This is showing me the files that I've been accessing most recently. So all of this is available in here. Now, one of the things that Microsoft is bringing us shortly is the ability to go to a particular channel and now do a Control F and only search from that point down. So we should see that in short order as well. So one of the big improvements here, as I mentioned, is the fact that we're getting this integrated search. Now, the way that we're getting integrated search is through Bing for Business. So if you have a look here, I've gone to Bing and I've done a search for that same file, 2122, and it's now presenting me results from my work environment, including files, people, sites, conversations. Now, how have I achieved that? Well, I achieved that, if you look in the top right, by logging into Bing. So what we can do is we can log into Bing with our Microsoft 365 credentials, and we can use that to basically search not only the internet, but we can also search our own material. Now, that own material, notice there's a little lock there that indicates that it is protected. It's just giving us that functionality. Now, we can tweak all of this by going into the Microsoft Search Admin Center, which we again find in the admin area under settings, under basically Microsoft Search. And you'll see here that we've got the ability to start curating search, to start improving it. So for example, we can create bookmarks. So let's say that we want to bookmark Flow, so that when someone does a search for Flow, it will present the URL, or maybe it's to your accounting package, or maybe it's to, again, something else specific. We can create those bookmarks that people use in a common way. Now, the first option there, Insights, also allows us to look at what are people searching, what are the results, what are we getting back from our organization, so we can start tweaking this to make it more targeted and more helpful for our users. We can do acronyms as well. So if you use things like M365, what does that actually mean? All these acronyms we use every day, we're familiar with them, but maybe others aren't. You'll see that we also have floor plans, so we can ingest maps of people's offices that they can make navigation easier. We've got location. So if you are working with a number of customers, maybe you can put their location in there. So when people do a search for that customer, it will show you their street location and give you a card that can be displayed. We've also got things like our Q&A. So again, best way is to show you what it looks like. So if we go in here and we go back to our browser, and we basically go in here and do a search for BRK2122. So again, I'm just going to invoke the normal Bing search. All right, so you'll see here across the top, I have a little padlock on here, which is the indication that it is a work data. And now I can go in here and I can see people, I can see groups, I can see sites that mention it, and I can see any conversations that are in there as well. All right, so if I go in here and maybe do Microsoft 365, let's hit enter. You'll see here that this now shows us conversations. So these conversations are coming from Teams, they could come from Yammer, but the main thing is if I want to, I can now have access to normal internet searching as well, but I also have my work integrated as well, meaning it's much easier to find the information that I want. I've got that single search experience, and this is the same on the desktop, on the mobile, on whatever, because of this tight integration with Edge, Bing, and Microsoft 365. Now, how do we actually go in and manipulate some of this? Well, we go into the admin, and when that comes up, we look at the settings here. So let's go to show all, let's go into settings. Under here, you'll find Microsoft Search. You'll see here that I haven't got any, unfortunately, enough people searching in my tenant, so there's no insights, but there would be graphs of that. You've got answers, so this is really good for what about this, or how do I fill out a pay form, those sort of standard sort of questions. I've got bookmarks, as I mentioned here, right? So one of the bookmarks here, let's see what it brings up when it comes up, is Office Online. So if I go in here and do something like Office Online, hit enter, you'll see here is the concept of a bookmark. So this is basically taking that manual configuration that I've put in here. So these bookmarks can basically refer to any URL site that you want. Here's my option for floor plans. No floor plans in there, unfortunately. You can draw those out and link them to people. Here are the locations. So I can go in here and I can designate locations. So if I do a search, that card will basically appear in the search at the top of my Office environment here. So that would appear here. And I can go in and also, I'll come back to that one. You can also go in here and do other customizations for your verticals. And there are a number of configurations here. Now, this to me is the real power of this. And this is what Microsoft's working really hard on. These third-party connectors. Now, these third-party connectors are going to connect into additional services here. Now, if we go add, we have a look at the data sources here. It's not a lot, but look at this one here. Right, so what we can do now is with Bing for Business integration here with Microsoft Search, we can now configure a local file server to be indexed, to have all that information indexed that's on there, and for that to be sucked up into the Microsoft Graph, into Microsoft Search, and then if it was connected, we could do a search here in Bing for Business, and we would see any local files that were also configured there if we had this set up. Now, Microsoft is working hard to provide additional data sources, links to SAP, accounting systems, third-party connectivity, social media. Expect to see these grow over time. But if you haven't and you still have on-prem resources, go in and have a look at the ability to connect on-prem file shares directly into the searching experience that you have. Now, the other thing that I'm really excited about, I think that's going to be a game changer here, is Project Cortex. So Project Cortex effectively is going to allow you to create an on-the-fly intranet tailored to the user on each entry. So it means it will build in things like Q&A, it will build in all the stuff that I've shown, but it will deliver it dynamically each time the user logs into the environment. So it will look at all the interactions like we've shown you in Delft and so on, and present that as a customized intranet for the organization. So again, the user will have this customized view of their environment presented to them each and every time they logged in. Basically, automatically, it will be built on the fly for each user individually. So it's like getting a customized search environment for you every time that you visit. So again, to me, it's like Delft on steroids. So if you haven't had a look at Project Cortex, take a moment, have a look at the AI that's involved in that, and it will take care of things of relevance. All that sort of stuff will happen behind the scenes to a user. Nothing they'll have to do will be presented to them. Less worry about where the information is. It'll just be presented to them. They click on it and it navigates to there. They don't have to worry it's in, oh, is it in this team site, in this channel, in this subfolder, where the hell is it? Project Cortex is going to take care of a lot of that. And as yet, hasn't been made available. There is a preview now that is available. The word is that we should be seeing something coming out June, July timeframe, but keep an eye out for that. So some takeaways for you. Improving the ability of people to find information quickly is going to improve your profitability. The quicker they can find information, the faster they can get their job done. I would start with using the out-of-the-box capabilities. So have a look at Delft. What can it do? What does it do by default? And then once you've worked that out, how do we enhance that? How do we add the context to Microsoft Search? How do we link in our on-prem file server? How do we link in other things like social media? How can we capture that and bring that into this information? But certainly start with what you get out of the box and what you can be manipulated there, what you can do with SharePoint, how you can integrate it with SharePoint sites. That's all available. There's programmatic ways to do it, lots of different things that you can do to extend the power of search. Now, Microsoft is in this transition with search. Yes, there's still some old world stuff and still some stuff in SharePoint, but we are seeing it move more and more to that new experience where we get that common search bar across the top in Microsoft 365, which will be our one point for searching everything, the one search location engine place to go to rule them all, which has been a long time coming, but we are beginning to see steps, major steps towards that direction. In general, best practice these days is to have a wide structure, not a deep structure. It doesn't matter how many teams you have because search will go across them, right? Don't keep using your folders as a way to categorize data. Look at using metadata as a better way to start categorizing, filtering, sorting your data rather than keeping very deep structures with lots of folders within folders within folders. And of course, that means having a think about your metadata and planning it beforehand. So when you want to define something like New South Wales, do you define it as NSW, capital NSW, N.S.W. So a little bit of planning up front makes a huge amount of difference so we have consistent metadata across the organization. If you have inconsistencies, again, you end up with a lot of challenges. And as much as you may think that people know how to search, they don't. So take some time and teach people how to use, for example, the ability to use inverted commas, excuse me, to use and, to use or, to use plus, to use not, to use the logic in there to get the most out of it. Most people, like I said, will just type bike shop and get 3 times the amount of results that they should get. But if they put in inverted commas, they will get what they're looking for. So everything, all technologies need some amount of training. Even Delft, I would suggest you need to give users a bit of an overview so they know what they're looking at, what makes sense, so they're not afraid of it. Some resources there for you to take a look at. The slides will be available after the event. I'll make sure I put them up on my blog as well as making it available to the organisers. If you do wish to contact me about any of this or in the future, my email address is there. Also, hit me up on Twitter. Don't be afraid to do that. With that, I think I'm about time, and I'll see if there are any questions in the queue. And once again, thanks so much for the opportunity to present at M365 May and also to our sponsors. Are there any questions?
Yes, we do have quite a few questions. Do you want me to read through them?
Yep.
All right, so the first question that came through, will Microsoft Search find third-party apps such as Dropbox?
So the idea is yes, it will. You just need an appropriate connection to achieve that. Once you have that connection, there's also what you need to think about is, okay, the search has to log into Dropbox to get access to that information. What user am I going to use to log in? So remember that to do a search, you're going to need an admin user to be able to index the lot of it. So there's going to be things around permissions as well. So the answer is yes, but like everything, you're going to have to think about how you do that, and Microsoft does have documentation about how to connect services like Dropbox and so on, and we expect to see those third-party connectors in Microsoft Search increase, and one of the first ones I would expect to see there shortly would be Dropbox.
All right, thank you. The next one from Simon. Our organisation has chosen not to show documents in Delft at the tenant level. Is this able to be turned on for specific sites and site collections in SharePoint?
No, so unfortunately, basically what you're doing, if you turn off Delft, what you're doing is you're basically disabling the results from the graph. The graph sits in the back end and doing that. So at the moment, it's an all or nothing, because as you can appreciate, if a user turns off Delft and then another user has Delft on and they go to see a user whose Delft is off, is that allowed, not allowed? And it gets a bit complicated there. So generally my advice to you is there is no downside to turning Delve on completely. The main thing is it means that you need to get your permissions right, because Delve is just a search engine. It's just going down the street, knocking on doors, seeing if any of the doors are open. If you've left the door open, then it will go in and have a look around. So to me, that is also a very good way to make sure your permissions are correct. So unfortunately, you do need to turn it on and allow the graph to do that sort of thing, and Delve is the tool that will do it. I believe you can still do it on individual SharePoint sites, but you are going to miss out a lot of the functionality. So there's nothing to be afraid about with Delve at all. It's just basically showing you what you have access to based on your permissions. If you have your permissions correct, then nothing untoward is going to pop up.
Awesome. And one final question from David. Do we know if Project Cortex bubbles down to M365 BizPrem, I assume Business Premium, or E5 only?
So the most likely situation is going to be that Project Cortex is a huge investment from Microsoft, and typically they will start out as E5 only options or add-ons or whatever. However, over time, I would expect this to become more and more common. So the answer is going to be probably initially you are going to need E3, E5. We're not sure as yet, or an add-on. Some of the features, some of the basic features may bubble down to the Microsoft 365 business SKUs, but at this stage, I would suggest to you, because of the investment and the technologies that Microsoft are putting into this, it's going to be an enterprise higher SKU to start off with. But as we know, generally everything over time will move across the SKU, but initially my bets would be on probably E5 or E3 only.
All right. Thanks very much, Robert. That is all the questions we've had in the queue there, so we're good.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, Lisa, for that, and obviously monitoring that in the background. Remember, people, to contact me if you do have any further questions. The repo will go up on the regarding 365 site. Don't forget the sponsors. Hope you get a bang out of the rest of what's left with Microsoft 365 May. Again, appreciate you attending. Thank you very much.